So welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by Ari Melamud, CEO of Doumatok, a mission-driven food tech company that is offering nutrition through its sugar reduction solutions. A fascinating space. And Ari, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Good seeing you, Simon. My pleasure.
Thank you. So tell me, just give me a little sense of, I suppose, some of the early upbringing or some of the key forces that help shape your influences, as it were.
Our influences, you mean the company's influences or my?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking now as a CEO of a really mission-driven startup. And I know that you're very passionate about it, but I'm thinking about all the experiences, say some of the formative experiences and earlier upbringing that were some of the kind of, I suppose, the key forces in shaping who you are now.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. So, if you look at my background, I've been a CEO for quite a few years. So, I think my first CEO role was 2006, so we're 17 years back, almost approaching 20 years. Never felt so old. But I've been working in large corporations most of my career. So I spent 17 years with Kimberly-Clark, which is an amazing company. I've spent almost 5 years with Publicis, which is the advertising giant out of France and other companies. And I've been always fortunate to work for great companies and learned a lot. But as you move on with your career, you kind of start searching for a purpose. So on becoming a CEO, which was a dream for many years, and then you become a CEO, you get into your room, the chair is bigger, the room is larger, the responsibility is definitely much bigger. But then you start looking for a deeper purpose. So some people would say money, not me. And as you grow older, and especially when you become more aware of what's going on with the world and sustainability, etc., you're saying, okay, what's my impact on this? How am I going to contribute to making this a better world for my children? And in my specific case, my grandchildren already. So I think it built up on me. It wasn't a day that I said, oh, I need to do something which is purpose-driven. It built up on me for quite a few years. And I said to myself, I'm one of the ways that I'm going to evolve is I'm going to search for, or I'm going to look for an opportunity to make an impact. And, working for a large corporation is great. These companies are doing good for a lot of people. However, there's something different about being on a mission of changing the world, making the world a better place is something that gives you energy when you get up in the morning that I cannot even describe.
Yeah.
It's in the essence of everything that you do. You feel good about what you do. And this is very different than working for any other larger corporation in my history, at least.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you for that. Absolutely. So tell me, let's look at the company. Doumatok. What are the, I suppose, the challenges that it looks to solve?
Yeah, so maybe even before, just to complete on your previous question and get into this latest question, the story of how I came to Doumatok is maybe an essence of what we just started discussing. So, I was working for another company. It was a global personal care and cosmetics ingredient company owned by private equity. So they brought me in when they bought the company, and I was asked to stay with the company until the company is going to be sold. So probably 6 to 7 years or so. And I was very happy with my previous role. And then one evening, I was sitting at home with my wife watching the Israeli main channel evening news. And there was this article for about 10 minutes about this crazy new food tech startup that is going to change the world by reinventing sugar. And it wasn't a short one. It was, as I said, it was about 10-minute article, and I was watching it. And when the article was finished, I looked at my wife and I said, wow, this is an amazing company. And she said, yeah. And that was it. And then 3 or 4 days later, I was at the office and my phone rang, and on the line was this headhunter, which I've never heard her name before. We've never spoken. And she said, Ari, I got your name from a few people, and there's this great startup that is looking for a CEO. I said, listen, I'm not interested. I'm where I am. I'm not going to move anywhere. I've made my my decision a few years back. But just out of curiosity, before we hang up, what kind of startup is it? And she said, it's in the food tech. You know, which companies did I know in food tech? The only one I knew basically was the one I was watching on television a few days earlier. So I said, is it Doumatok? She said, how do you know? I said, I don't know. I just guessed. That's probably the only food tech company that I really heard of. She said, yes. And I said, you know what? We need to talk. And it was 4 or 5 weeks after that I already joined the company. So, you know, first of all, it's a great story and a coincidence. But back to your previous question, going into the new question, what really made it different for me, I actually made a decision to leave my previous job and move into Doumatok was actually the feeling that this is a great opportunity to work for a company and to lead a smaller company, because I've always run larger companies. Pluses and minuses always, but to go work for a much smaller company, it's a startup, but to take this startup and make it into a success, you win twice, because you build your own company into something that is a successful, bigger company, which is always an amazing challenge professionally. But at the same time, if the company will be successful, that means that we've won. We means the people on Earth, because we're going to make Earth better for many aspects: consumer health, sustainability. We're going to talk about this, but there's a double win here, which is an amazing opportunity for someone with my background and my wishes and desires moving forward.
You know what, Ari, it's very good that you take cold calls. You know, this is the thing. So many people, they don't even take cold calls. They put the phone down to the headhunter. So it shows you're a very good listener. So,
or that I'm too curious sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, it is an amazing story. I mean, you know, it's almost like destiny, isn't it, really?
It is in many aspects. And I do believe that, you know, in your lifetime, you get into points or junctions when you need to take a decision, and you take a decision and it takes you to a completely different route. And it's amazing. It's the, you know, revolving doors or whatever you call it. It was one of those moments where I said, you know, it needs to happen. It didn't just happen because it needed to happen. So here we are. This was almost 2 years ago. Amazing.
So let's chat about the company then, and let's chat a little bit about the mission, and, you know, talk through some of the kind of problems, you know, that you're looking to solve.
Yeah. So you know, we're in the food business. So food tech is basically new technology that helps food companies to bring in better products in many aspects. It's a great combination of technology, consumer awareness, and a lot of things that making this more relevant now than it was 10 years ago or so. Now, in food tech, there are different categories. There's a lot about proteins, alternative meat. We've all heard about, you know, Beyond Meat and these guys that are changing the world in many aspects. So we're in the world, and we need to realize that this is an amazing time to be part of the food tech industry, because, you know, we think about this, Simon, we and our grandfathers and our grandfathers' grandfathers basically been eating the same food all the way back to where we lived in caves. So we would go out and hunt for our meat. Now we go to the supermarket, but the meat is the same meat. and the eggs are the same eggs, etc. So basically, what we as human beings been eating for thousands of years is basically the same.
Mm.
Now,
Yeah.
this is now changing.
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 years from now, our kids and grandchildren is going to eat different food. And it's an amazing time to be part of this industry as it's going through probably the biggest revolution ever. And it's the largest industry in the world, food.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? It's almost like when you look at 9 billion people on the earth by 2050, and like, you know, and you think about agricultural practices and how we, you know, how we source and eat our food. It's just not tenable, is it really?
So it's a combination. There's the food tech and the ag tech are very close, not the same thing. So ag tech is more about really building a sustainable source of ingredients and food that we will need in the next 20, 30, 40 years, which is going to be a big challenge for the world. Food tech industry is right next to it, is how do we use new technologies to make our food healthier, more sustainable, etc. So they live coincide one to another. So food tech is a very interesting category to be part of these days with the revolution of the food as we know it. And we as Doumatok would like to be one of those very few companies that help lead this revolution by spearheading the particular category of sugar and sugar. You know, everybody knows sugar is not good for us. Actually, to be more accurate, sugar is not bad for us. Too much sugar is bad for us. So we as human beings are basically eating, in average, about 4 times more sugar than we should. Sugar is we need to remember, is not a bad ingredient. It's a natural ingredient that adds energy, gives energy to our bodies. The problem with sugar is that eating too much of it is fattening. So basically what we're witnessing, and it's not a new phenomenon, is the global pandemic of overweight. Yeah. So we're looking at the numbers, saying that, you know, almost 40% of the adult population in the world is already overweight or obese.
40%.
40% globally.
Yeah, amazing.
1/3 of the children in the world are already overweight or obese. 1/3. Now think about those children when they become adults 20 years from now. It's going to be a huge problem. We're seeing numbers on diabetes growing 4 times over the past 20 years globally. So people are getting fatter. People are becoming more and more diabetes. And there's about 6.5 million people dying every year because of obesity.
6.5 million people around the world.
Around the world, direct results of obesity. This is more than COVID, the entire 3 years of COVID.
Yeah. But tell me though, this whole pandemic, it's a recent thing, isn't it? Over the last 20 years or so, right?
I would say more than 20 years. I would say probably 40 or 50 years. What we're seeing is that 2 things come together. One, the food industry has basically put more and more sugar in our recipes. One of the reasons is because it's very tasty. We like sweet. We like sugar. We get addicted to sugar in a way. The other thing is that sugar is one of the cheapest ingredients inside our recipe. So the more sugar inside our recipes, the lower the cost of the product is. So in a way, we found more and more sugar in our recipes, actually much more than we should have in many aspects. On the other side, to complete the same problem in a way, is the consumer behavior. So we've been eating the last 40, 50 years a lot more pre-prepared food, a lot more junk food, and the combination of having more sugar in our diet and our diet residuals, or the way we consume food, has driven this dramatic increase in obesity globally. And this is something that even the UN, the United Nations, is trying to address, because it's a global pandemic that probably considered to be the biggest pandemic derived out of the food industry is the sugar pandemic. So if you look at consumers in the past 4 or 5 years, and maybe even more so, but certainly since COVID, are becoming more and more aware of what goes into our food. So if you look at the countries like in Europe, in the US, in Scandinavia, and others, consumers are becoming more and more aware, especially the younger generation. So if you look at my kids in the 20th, they would read the labels, they would go online and search for ingredients that they are not familiar with, and they're trying to eat healthier. That's a global phenomenon. Regulation is trying to address the problem of sugar obesity or sugar pandemic by 2 ways. One is applying more and more taxes on sugar, in a way penalize the food companies for the over consumption of sugar. And the second way, which is actually more effective, is the labeling system. So we now have dozens of countries where it's mandatory to mention either on the back of the pack and sometimes even on the front of the pack if you have too much or high level of sugar, same as sodium, salt, and fat. So in Israel, it's called the red stickers. In Mexico, it's the black stickers. In Europe, most countries in Europe would be under the Nutri-Score. Different ways for the regulator to inform us, to force the companies to inform us of the different bad ingredients inside specific recipe that we should all be aware before we're buying it. Right. And that drives a big change in the market.
Yeah, I'm just thinking whether I see any of that in the UK, for instance, in terms of some of that stuff.
The Nutri-Score, you live in the UK, right?
Yeah.
So the Nutri-Score is the system used in most countries in Europe, where on the back of the pack, you get a score between a green and a red.
Okay.
And the formula that drives the score is based on the different ingredients inside the product. So it's almost like a mathematical
is it? Okay.
You plug in whatever ingredients you have on the product and you get a score. A green product is a good product. And the more it goes into the dark red, it means that it's not a good product for you. So that's one system. Other systems would be like in Israel, would be a good example. You have a sticker. It's not a sticker today, but it started as stickers in the front of the pack that once you go beyond a certain threshold of sugar, salt, or fat, you have to mention on a large red sticker, high level of sugar in the product. So consumers can actually one day walk down the aisle before they even pick up the product in their hands, they can tell whether this product is more healthy or less healthy.
Yeah.
That's another way for regulators to try and help consumers be more aware of what goes into our food and what goes into our bodies.
Yeah.
And those two elements, the regulation from one hand and the consumers' awareness and demand for healthier food from the other hand, is driving the food companies into making a lot of efforts and investments in reducing sugar.
Yeah, understand. Hence why your company is right in the sweet spot of offering solutions in this space.
Yeah. So and by the way, it's not a new thing. Companies have been looking at ways to reduce sugar for decades now. You know, all the way back to saccharin, which was presented to the market in the 70s, and then the aspartames.
Yeah.
Then more recently, sugar alternatives like stevia and monk fruit and others. There are plenty of sugar alternatives in the market.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of them are natural, some are artificial, some of them are very sweet. So, you know, stevia could be up to 400 or 500 times sweeter than sugar. The problem with all these sugar alternatives is one, they don't taste like sugar.
Yeah. Yeah.
They may be very sweet or not sweet enough, but they have a different sweetness profile. So think about it. If you take a chocolate and you take sugar out and you put stevia instead, I don't know if you ever tasted chocolate with stevia, and I have nothing against stevia. I think it's a great solution for a certain point of the market. It doesn't taste like the original chocolate.
Yeah.
Some people would say it's not bad, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Now, when you have so many products on the shelf for companies that are interested in reducing sugar, if they are not able to maintain the original taste of the product, think about a product like Nutella. Everybody knows Nutella. It has a very unique taste to it that people love. If you take out sugar and you put stevia inside a Nutella, it will not taste like Nutella anymore. It will have a different taste. So companies that are even looking at reducing sugar actually don't have a solution today. They don't have a real solution that will allow them to maintain the original taste of the product. And every research of class 1.0 for every brand manager in the food industry, he knows taste is king. Consumer prefer the brand based on taste before anything else. If they don't like the taste, they're not going to buy it again. So for a company like Ferrero to take Nutella and reduce on sugar, eventually, up until today, it meant changing the taste of the product. So they were stuck. And this is where we come into the game. So Doumatok is all about, we're actually the first and only company that reduces sugar with sugar. So what we did is we basically reinvented sugar. So instead of looking for alternatives for sugar, all those kinds of sugar alternatives, we said to ourselves, why don't we look at sugar and find ways to use regular sugar, but make it sweeter so we can use less of it. So our technology is basically using regular sugar. 99.9% is regular sugar. To that 99.9% regular sugar that is made of sugar cane or sugar beet, same thing, we add 0.1%. So it's 0.1% of our sugar is a mineral that we add into the sugar. And what the mineral does is one thing, it's nothing chemical about this. So we're not changing any molecules. We're not creating new molecules here. We're adding a physical element in a tiny amount to the sugar. And the whole purpose of this element is to make our sugar dissolve faster in our mouth. So let me give you an example. If you take a bite now of a chocolate, any chocolate, milk chocolate usually have about 50% sugar in it, 50. What happens in our mouth is that we break the chocolate with our teeth, and then it dissolves through the saliva and reaches the taste receptors that are on our tongue. So we feel the taste of the ingredients inside the product. The problem is, think about it, this whole process from taking the food into our mouth until we swallow takes just a very few seconds. It could be 2 seconds if you are a fast eater. It could be 4 or 5 seconds if you are slower. But because it's a very limited short time, there isn't enough time for most of the sugar inside that bite that we took to break, dissolve, reach the taste receptors. Actually, and that's quite shocking, 70 to 80% of the sugar inside the bite that we just took doesn't have enough time to dissolve and reach the taste receptors. So it goes directly into our body without affecting the taste whatsoever and turn into fat almost immediately. 70 to 80% of the sugar inside that bite.
Wow, that's amazing.
The whole idea behind our technology is that by adding this 0.1% mineral into our crystal, into our sugar, we make the molecule structure, and I'm not going to go much into the science because, you know, I know your listeners and viewers are not scientists, but it's quite easy to understand. Because we add the mineral into the crystal, it makes a molecule structure less rigid. So what happens is when you take the same bite from the same chocolate, but now with our sugar in it, which looks exactly like regular sugar, our sugar breaks faster and dissolves faster. So under those very few seconds that we play with the food in our mouth, more sugar is being able to be dissolved and reach the taste receptor. So actually, if we kept the same level of sugar, we would get a much sweeter product because more effectively, we feel more sugar, which basically allows us to reduce up to 50% of the sugar and maintain the same sweetness, but not less importantly, the exact same sweetness profile, because again, we are based on sugar. It is sugar. 99.9% sugar. So we're able to maintain the same sweetness and the same sweetness profile, which for the first time allows global food companies to look at reducing sugar significantly on existing products without changing the original taste of the product.
Amazing. Yeah.
That's the whole idea.
Incredible. Tell me, what is the mineral? What is the actual mineral then?
So we have launched our first generation product, what we call Gen 1, about 2 years ago. The mineral that we're using in Gen 1 is silica. Silica is commonly used in thousands of recipes around the world. It's used a lot in the pharmaceutical world. By the way, our technology is not completely unique. It's quite popularly used in the pharmaceutical world when they take the same silica and add it into the active ingredient inside the drug that we take in order for the active ingredient to be absorbed quicker by our body.
Got it.
And we are actually the first and only company that took the same idea into the world of food. So the mineral that we use in a generation 1 is silica. We are moving away from silica into 100% clean label solution in the next few months. This will be a separate announcement that we will make that will make our product even cleaner. So not 99.9% clean, because silica, although commonly used, is referred to, in some cases, not a very clean solution. So again, no problem in our product because it's 0.1% of the sugar. So in the final recipe, the amount of silica that we have is so small that you don't even have to mention it on the label. Yeah. It's a neglectable amount because it's 0.1% of the sugar inside the recipe. So in the final recipe is a few ppms. However, some companies, especially the multinational companies, like silica less. And that's why we're just about to launch a new solution that takes away silica and replace it with a 100% clean label solution. I'm almost tempted to say what it is, but then my team will kill me.
Yeah.
That's a different announcement that we're going to make in about a couple of months.
Great.
So we are going to launch second generation in about 2 months from now. With one of the advantages of second generation is that we're moving away from silica to a very commonly used clean label solution.
Got it. So tell me, how do you commercialize this? Because as you mentioned before, right, sugar is a cheap commodity, and all of a sudden you're talking about, you only need a fraction of it, right? So how do you actually do that part of making money and scaling a successful commercial business with it?
Yeah. So first of all, we need to understand our model. So we're not producing or selling our own products, consumer products to the market. So we're not creating our own chocolates or our own cakes or gummies or whatever. And again, it goes back to our mission because our mission is to allow our technology to go into as many formulas and recipes as possible, so we as consumers can find more and more products, as many products as possible that have less sugar in it. So in global potential, think about it, our total market is almost the whole food industry, and we can reduce 30 to almost 50% of the global consumption of sugar. So if we are human beings eating 3-4 times more sugar than we should, by cutting it by half, we're going a long way to make our food much healthier.
There's a big prize. There's a big prize there, right?
There's a big prize there. And we haven't talked about this, but we also need to realize sugar is not just a health problem. Sugar is also a sustainable problem for Earth, because not many people know this, but sugar is the largest crop being grown on Earth. It takes more space and resources than any other crop, and is almost as big as number 2 and number 3 combined, which are rice and wheat. And sugar by itself contributes to more than 3% of the global CO2 emission, which is more than any other crop being grown on Earth, and more than the entire aviation industry, as an example. So we need to remember sugar is not just a health problem, it's also a sustainable problem for the planet. So if we are successful, the more companies that will use our technology and will reduce significantly of the amount of sugar, the more we'll just have a better world for all of us. So our model is not to launch, I started saying that our model is not to launch our own products to the market. Because different reasons, but one of the reasons would be then that our technology exposure will be very limited. Let's say we launch a chocolate and we take 10% of the global market, which will be crazy. You know, it's like Ferrero. It's still only 10%. So our model is a B2B model. So basically, we are a specialty ingredient company that works with the food companies. So we're producing our own sugar. And the idea is to sell our sugar to the food companies to replace their regular sugar with our sugar. And in the future generations, it will evolve. But so this is the idea. So what we do is we have teams on the ground in the US, technical support people, application labs, and obviously salespeople. Same in Europe now. And we do plan to go into Asia Pacific towards the end of this year. So by 2024, we'll probably have a global presence where the idea is that we talk to all food companies. We introduce our technology. They obviously take time to test it. And once they realize that it actually delivers on the promise, then they move into applying our technology in their products. And by doing so, allowing a product that is much better for us as consumers. So this is our model. Obviously, it's a challenging model because, as we said, sugar is a cheap ingredient, one of the cheapest ingredients, and obviously our product is more expensive than regular sugar. However, when you look at the balance between the premium that you pay for our sugar versus the 40 or 50% that you can reduce, it's almost equal. It's almost equal. So we call it sweetness parity. To make life a bit more complicated, we need to realize that sugar is not just taste, it's also a functional ingredient that adds bulk and texture to our recipes. Once you take, let's say, 50% of the sugar out, you need to put something back in to replace the sugar and get the bulk and the texture, etc.
Yeah, how much of that is, okay, that's interesting. So it's texture, it's a texture and it's a bulk as well in terms of for the product to look like.
Think about a cake, a pound cake, yes, a vanilla pound cake that we all know. If you take 50% of the sugar out, you put it in the oven, you'll get a pita bread, not a cake. Yeah, okay. There will not be enough bulk. Yeah. So part of what we do, once we've reduced, let's say 50% of the sugar, is we also give the technical support to our customers, which are the food companies, of what ingredients, better for you ingredients, you may add into the recipe to replace the sugar to get the same bulk and the same texture, and again, without changing the original taste of the product. That's a specialty know-how that most companies, even the largest food companies, don't have because they don't have experience with sugar reduction. Right, okay. So part of what we need to do is not just to sell our ingredient to our customers, but also to give them the technical support all the way to the final recipe of what are the replacement that they need to redo to put back into the recipe instead of the sugar that our technology allows to take out. And that's why if you come to our offices, you'll see that we have two labs. One is what we call the fundamental R&D labs, where all these smart people with tons of PhDs are working all day in reducing our next generations of sugar. But there's also an application lab right in the middle of the office where they are playing with our technology in different applications for our customers. So every customer that comes to us, we go into the lab, we take out sugar, we put in different ingredients back in, and we play with it. And every recipe is different. There are almost no two recipes that requires the exact same solution because of different balances of different ingredients, etc. So 60% of our team here in Israel, which is our global headquarters, are food scientists, chefs, and people that are, and formulators. This is what they do. So when we go to our customers, we're not just selling them our ingredient, we're giving them the full technical support of what the final recipe should be if they want to maintain the original taste.
Right, great.
And the lowest cost increase as possible, because every new ingredient that we will add in to replace sugar, let's say fibers, proteins, good for you, those are way more expensive than sugar.
Yeah.
So our challenge is not just how much our sugar costs versus regular sugar, but what ingredients to use to replace the sugar with, and how we balance the cost of the product. So this is part of the expertise that we built here in order to give our customers the full service that they need.
Yeah, yeah. Is the biggest challenge with this just, in terms of real commercialization and, over the next 5-10 years in terms of really making the impact? Is it the cost profiling, which is the biggest challenge to overcome?
Two challenges. One, we need to prove on our promise that we can deliver the same taste. And that usually, our first meeting with every customer, which we call the POC meeting, proof of concept meeting, is, and I think we're the only company in the world that we come in with two samples, the original product with full sugar and our version of the product with, let's say, 50% less sugar in a blind test. Now, we dare them to tell us which one is which one is their original product and which one has 50% less sugar in it. Most cases, almost 100% of the cases, they cannot tell the difference.
Really? Oh, I'd love to do that blind test, Ari. I'd love to do that.
I'm happy to send you some samples and see how good taster you are. But once you go through the POC and they've tasted the product and they see, because again, if we put stevia in, they will be able to tell it immediately. They're experts, especially in their own products. So once you go into the POC and they test the product and they immediately understand the benefits of our technology. Now, we start the whole process of product development, because then we need to go into their own very specific recipe, not a prototype of something similar to, because we don't have the recipe for Nutella, as an example.
Yeah.
It's owned by Nutella. But once we go through the POC and they're impressed, we go to a period of, can take anything between 1 year to sometimes even 3 years of developing a specific solution for a specific recipe of a specific company. And then once we deliver on that, well, our R&D teams are working together with the customer R&D until they come to a point where they say, this is perfect. Now they go and test the product with consumers, especially first with panel and then global consumers. So back to your question, our first challenge is the cycle and how long does it take? Because starting a project now can take 3 years until it becomes commercial. So that's one challenge, is how do we make these 3 years into 2 years and the 2 years into 1 year? And the second challenge, absolutely exactly what you said, is how do we master different ingredients so the offering will not take the price up as much as possible. Every sugar reduction project globally today, regardless if you use Incredo, which is our technology, or you use stevia, or you use monk fruit, or you use aspartame. Every project for sugar reduction means increasing cost. Because again, you take out sugar, which cost depends on the country, anything between $0.50 to $1 a kilogram. And you want to replace it with good ingredients. Otherwise, you've done nothing. So fibers could be up to $5-6 a kilogram. That's 5-6 times more expensive. So really, you need to master different alternatives, and really depends on the company's brief. If it's a premium brand, if it's a value brand, really depends on what the company is looking for to bring in the right solution for them. These are the two main challenges of going into the world. But I have to say, we've been in the market for a bit more than 18 months now. We focused on the US market first. That's our first market, and we're just launching into Europe now. We are currently running hundreds of global projects with the biggest companies you can mention. I cannot obviously mention names here, but the biggest companies in the market, because again, our solution is so unique and our advantage in taste is so obsolete that if you're an R&D leader of, let's use the same example of Nutella, it takes you very few seconds to understand the benefits. Now, we need to work together and make sure that it actually works in the specific recipe of Nutella, which, by the way, we did.
Exciting. I mean, it really does sound exciting. So you feel that you'll be able to, in time, go after mass market rather than just premium kind of market?
Absolutely. We're not only targeting premium companies. No, we're talking to everybody in the market, from the tier 1 global multinationals, the Nestle's and the Unilevers and the Ferreros of the world, into a medium-sized and smaller-sized customer. It could be a bakery out of Idaho, US, that sells $20 million a year. Actually, I like those guys because these guys can move faster.
They can move for, yeah, absolutely.
So while we running these big projects with the huge companies that will take maybe 3 years, there is this early birds guys that can move faster because, you know, the owner is the CEO, who's also the marketing director, is also the formulator. So they can move faster.
Busy guy.
He's a busy guy, yeah. But I like those guys because they can move fast.
Yeah, great. So tell me, where you stand now. You mentioned, the journey. You look back at the career and you look back at, the jobs that you did, and you've come to a scale-up company. And part of this is, there's 2 prizes here. We speak about. What are your hopes and dreams, for the company in the next 5 years, 10 years or so, in terms of, what would you genuinely hope to achieve?
It's a very good question. And I think when you run an early stage company, we're at the growth stage. So we're not a startup so much anymore. We're a team of close to 60 people. We have a team on the ground in the US. We now have a team in Europe already. And obviously most of our people are here in our headquarters in Israel. But our mission is very clear. We want to make our technology as widely used as possible. We believe that if we do the right things, we can take a big part of the market. And the market is the food market. The sugar industry is a $75 billion, almost $80 billion market. That's the sugar industry. Most of it is not what we use at home for our coffee or the cake that we bake once a week. 90% of the market goes into the packaged goods that we buy, from pasta to bread to alternative meat, and all the way to confectionaries and bakeries and those guys that are using 40, 50, 60% sugar in their products. So the market is huge. If we take 5% of the market, do the math, it's a multi-billion-dollar company. So if you ask my opinion, in 5 years, I think that we need to bring our technology to the market. We need to convince companies that we can deliver on our promise, which I know we can. And then it's almost endless. The opportunity is just huge. And because our technology is so unique, it could be very, very big. So if you ask what my dream is that we make our technology available at multiple large companies and brands globally. And on the way, take this company to become a multi-billion company for our shareholders and those people that believe in our company. So, we have a long list of investors, some really top-notch investors. Some of the largest food companies in the world invested in our company because they understand our potential. And I think that, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, we'll do good for the company and for the shareholders and for the consumers and the world all at the same time.
It's a win-win, Ari. It's a win-win. It's great. And look, we wish you, it's a fascinating discussion and really exciting company, exciting journey that you've had. So really appreciate you coming on today to talk through this. And we'll be rooting for you and watching out for you. So, best of luck with everything.
Thank you very much, Simon. And thanks for those people who were listening. I hope this was interesting enough. Definitely very exciting for us. We're very, very excited about the opportunity that our technology presents to the food industry. It's an amazing opportunity to be part of this.